When I told my wife I could live without her, she laughed. Not just a chuckle. A full-bodied, head-tilted, dismissive kind of laugh. The kind people give when they think you're joking, or worse, delusional. She even clapped her hands once like it was a punchline. You, she said, eyes scanning her phone mid-scroll. You'd be lost without me. I didn't argue. That was the last time I spoke to her in our shared home. The next morning, while she was at brunch with friends, the kind of brunch I was never invited to, I packed. Quietly. Efficiently. Just my things. Laptop, documents, 2 duffel bags, and a small lockbox. I didn't leave a note. She wouldn't notice for hours anyway. By nightfall, I was in a short-term rental across town. Sparse furniture, concrete floors, and a rattling AIC unit that sounded like it was gasping for air. But it was mine. The silence felt like oxygen. We weren't always like that. 5 years ago, we were the type of couple people envied, or at least pretended to. Alina was radiant, magnetic in social settings, always with the right joke, the loudest laugh. I played the background, made sure the bills were paid, the plans made, the promises kept. I was her scaffolding. She was the marquee. Somewhere along the way, she stopped seeing the value in structure. At first, it was subtle. Comments slipped in under her breath during dinner with friends. Oh, he's great with spreadsheets and socks. Or, he's the reason our taxes are done on time. Thrilling, right? They laughed. I smiled. I thought it was harmless. Then came the isolation. Vacations she took solo. Events I heard about afterward. Entire weekends where the only words exchanged were hey and night. She said I was boring. Predictable. You don't take up space, she once told me. You're like wallpaper. Useful, but forgettable. She didn't know I was listening that night. Her friend Maya had come over. They drank wine, gossiped, and eventually turned the conversation to relationships. He'd never leave you, Maya said. He needs you. Alina had laughed then too. Exactly. That's the power. That was the night I decided to vanish. The first 2 months were tactical. I contacted my attorney, not the one we shared for our joint investments, but a separate one I'd quietly retained during her third soul-searching trip to Tulum. We split everything digitally, quietly, and thoroughly. All joint accounts closed. All assets separated. The prenup she once forced on me, in what she claimed was a modern empowerment move, turned out to be my greatest shield. Then I ghosted. No texts. No calls. No social media. She tried to bait me the third week with a passive-aggressive Instagram story. A photo of an empty wine glass, captioned, "Some things are better left unfinished." I ignored it. By month 3, the text came. First casual, "Hey, you left some stuff here." Then angrier, "So you're really just running away?" Eventually, silence. Good. That's what I wanted. I wasn't wasting time. I was building. The money I'd tucked away in the last year of our marriage, small side projects, freelance consulting, contract work she never noticed. I used to buy a foreclosed property on the edge of town. Brick exterior, high ceilings, gated entrance. It needed work, but I knew how to build from ruin. Every day, I showed up at 6 a.m. and left at dusk. Painted walls, sanded floors, installed fixtures. I hired contractors for the heavy work, but the bones of the place? Those were mine. It wasn't about the house. It was about proof. Not to her. To me. By the 6th month, it was done. Modern. Clean. Functional. No dead space. No clutter. I didn't post it online. Didn't tag the location. I sent one photo, just one, to an old mutual acquaintance of ours, a guy named Leo who could never keep his mouth shut. The caption was simple. Housewarming next month. Guest list solid. I knew it would reach her, and I made sure the guest list would twist the knife. There was her former business partner, the one who walked away from their boutique after Alina's ego torpedoed the brand. There was her favorite interior designer, who she never paid for that last project. There was her college roommate, whom she hadn't spoken to since she started climbing social ladders. All of them were invited. Confirmed. And one more name. Maya. The same Maya who once said, "He needs you." I made sure she got a personal invite, handwritten, on thick ivory cardstock. I knew Alina would hear about it. The question was when. The answer came 2 days before the party. She called. First time in nearly 7 months. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail, her tone careful, casual. "Hey, heard about the housewarming. That's cool. Just wondering why all our friends are going to your thing. Let's catch up sometime." I didn't respond. That night, I added one more name to the guest list. My architect, her ex, the one before me, the one she claimed was a childish mistake. People like Alina never understand that attention doesn't equal affection. That just because you laugh the loudest doesn't mean people stay loyal. I hadn't rebuilt my life for revenge, but I wasn't above letting her see the aftermath, especially when she realized she wasn't invited. The morning of the party, it rained. Not the kind of rain that ruins events, more like a soft, theatrical drizzle. Just enough to add weight to the air and tension to the sidewalks. I liked it. It matched the mood. Inside, everything was in place. The hardwood floors gleamed. The playlist was low and calculated, upbeat, but not obnoxious. Scented candles, subtle lighting, catering delivered on time. Clean. Controlled. By 6, people began to arrive. Leo showed up first, loud as always, grinning with that "I know everything" energy he couldn't hide if his life depended on it. "So," he said, scanning the room, "you weren't dead, just planning a comeback tour." I smiled. "Something like that." He handed me a bottle of Japanese whiskey, way too expensive, which meant he wanted to be in my good graces. I took it, nodded, and moved on. Over the next hour, they filtered in. All names she'd recognize. All faces she'd forgotten she'd burned. They shook my hand, hugged me, marveled at the house. "I can't believe you did this alone," they kept saying. I didn't correct them. Maya arrived around 7:30. Her eyes scanned the room, sharp, calculating, not with judgment, but with curiosity. She hugged me lightly. "Didn't think I'd make the list," she said. "You didn't," I replied. "You made my list." Her expression softened, then she glanced around. "Does she know?" "She will." I didn't have to say Alina's name. Everyone here knew who she was. Knew the laugh. Knew the condescension. Knew the version of her that sucked all the oxygen out of every room and made people feel lucky to be noticed. Around 8, the music dipped. A shift in the energy. I turned toward the door, not because I expected her, but because I'd seen the pause ripple through the guests. Leo leaned in. "She's outside." I didn't move. "She's not coming in," he added. "Just standing there, reading the guest list." I walked to the window. There she was. Alina, umbrella in one hand, phone in the other. Still stunning in that curated, magazine cover kind of way. But she wasn't polished tonight. No makeup crew. No handlers. Just a woman standing on the outside of something she thought she'd never be excluded from. She read the names taped neatly on the doorframe. A subtle nod to exclusivity. Not a bouncer. Just paper and tape. But every name was a mirror she didn't want to face. She looked up. Through the glass, her eyes locked with mine. She didn't wave. Didn't smile. Just stood there, wet hair clinging to her face, expression unreadable. I didn't blink. After a few seconds, she turned. Got in her car. Drove off. Maya stepped beside me. She thought you'd let her in. She thought a lot of things. The rest of the night unfolded like a calm victory lap. Laughter, conversations, toasts. Every guest had a story about Alina. None told maliciously, just matter of fact. The unpaid invoices. The ghosted texts. The parties where she made it clear they were lucky to even be there. "She forgot people remember how you make them feel," one said. Another guest, an old friend of hers from college, leaned in at one point and said, "You know, she used to say you were replaceable." I nodded. She wasn't wrong. He blinked. "Really?" I glanced around at the crowd. "She replaced me a long time ago. I just returned the favor." By midnight, the last guests were leaving. I stood on the porch as Leo lit a cigarette, hands in his coat pockets. "You think she'll try to spin it?" he asked. "Definitely," I said. "She'll say she was invited. That she chose not to come." He laughed. "She's good at rewriting history." "That's fine," I said. "I just write better endings." I went inside, shut the door, and turned off the porch light. She used to say I didn't take up space. Now the whole house was mine. The next morning, the inbox started filling. Texts, emails, missed calls, all from people who weren't at the party, but knew someone who was. News traveled fast in our circles, faster than truth, sometimes. But this time, the truth had documentation, tagged photos, filtered selfies, location check-ins, and that unmistakable guest list. Her absence wasn't a mystery. It was a statement. By noon, I got a message from Alina. 3 words. "Can we talk?" I didn't reply, but I didn't block her either. Instead, I waited. I wanted to see how far she'd go, because that's how people like her operate. not by confronting consequences, but by managing appearances. By sunset, a second message came. Longer this time. You made your point. I just wish you'd told me how unhappy you were instead of doing all this. Still not an apology. Still about control. I forwarded the message to my attorney. No commentary. Just for the record. The next day, she called my sister. Then one of my oldest friends. Testing the waters. Playing the victim. He blindsided me, she said. He's being vindictive. I just want peace. What she really wanted was her image back. I didn't interfere. Didn't try to correct the narrative. I didn't need to. Enough people had seen who she was without me saying a word. The emails kept coming, from former acquaintances, mutual contacts, even one of her ex-clients. They weren't looking for gossip. They were connecting dots. Turns out, I wasn't the only one she'd underestimated. The housewarming wasn't just a party. It was a reckoning. By the end of the week, I finally responded. A single message. I don't need closure. I need distance. She didn't reply after that. I heard through Leo that she tried to spin a version of the story where I'd gone off the rails, had a breakdown, vanished for attention. But it didn't stick. Too many people knew the truth, not because I shouted it, but because she'd handed them the pieces herself over the years. I didn't lose sleep over her silence. I slept better now. No secondhand stress. No dinner parties filled with subtle jabs and performative affection. No more being the punchline to someone else's performance. The house remained quiet, and I kept it that way. No grand celebrations. No social media parades. Just clean spaces, sharp edges, and peace. Sometimes I sit on the back porch with a glass of wine and stare at nothing. Not out of melancholy. Just to remind myself what nothing feels like when it isn't filled with someone else's noise. One afternoon, weeks later, I found a letter in the mailbox. Handwritten. No return address. It was from her. The tone was strange, part apology, part revisionist history. She wrote about how she'd lost herself trying to chase a version of success that was never real. She talked about pressure, fear, insecurity. She said she never meant to make me feel invisible. The last line read, "Maybe I needed to lose you to understand your worth." I folded it once, placed it back in the envelope, and slid it into the fire pit out back. Watched it catch, curl, blacken, and vanish. People like her never really say sorry. They say enough to keep their image intact. But I wasn't interested in being her redemption arc. My story had already ended. The party was never about revenge. It was about reintroduction. I wasn't the man she laughed at anymore. And now, she wasn't even on the guest list.